You're going to learn how to work with loops in the verse programming language, and loops are super, super important. So you've got to learn this, and this builds upon the previous lessons in this series. So make sure you watch those if you haven't already. This is where some real magic starts to happen. So in our Fortnite editor here, you're going to see all my devices. I'm going to click the existing device from the previous lesson and delete it. And I'm going to open my Verse Explorer or Verse Explorer, and I'm going to create a new verse file. This one is going to be called Lesson 04 and create. I'm going to go to Verse, build verse code, and you can click this button here to open your Visual Studio if it's not already opened. I'll drag my window open here, and now I can see my Lesson 4. And today, the loops are going to show us how to repeat actions over and over so we don't have to copy and paste code. If you remember from before in Lesson 3 and other places, we copy and paste code multiple times, right? Like, for instance, if player health is less than or equal to 0, if player health is less than or equal to 0, we're doing it multiple times. But that's not what we want to do. That's bad because I can mess up code. I can copy and paste the wrong thing. I can edit it. We want our code to be as small and reusable as possible. There's a principle in programming called the dry principle. It means don't repeat yourself. If you find yourself repeating a lot of the same code over and over, you're probably doing it wrong. However, as a beginner, don't worry about that principle too much. It's more important to learn the syntax. And when you can't solve a problem and you know somewhere in there you could make it better, you feel like you could make this code better, but you don't know how, don't worry about it. Don't try. Just live with that code and you'll learn over time. So yes, don't repeat yourself, but don't worry about it too much just yet. But the loops will help a little bit. So we repeated ourselves here in Lesson 3 quite a bit. So how can we write loops? Well, we can do it a few different ways. And this video is simple loops. There's complicated loops and there's simple loops. And I'm going to give you the simple version first. And so we specify a loop using the loop keyword, like so. Loop and then the word colon. And then what we do is we print or do some stuff like so. And then it's like, why is it yelling at us? To prevent infinite immediate iteration, loop must have one or more sub-expressions that are either async or jump out, such as break or return. This is an infinite loop. A loop will run as many times as it goes until we tell it to stop. And in some programs, that will cause your program to freeze. Luckily, with the way Verse works with Unreal Engine, these are like separate game objects and they all kind of have their own loops, so it's not a terribly big idea, but it is in terms of performance in your game. You don't want mistakes, you don't want wasted resources, and of course we don't want crashes either. So we have to have a way to break out of a loop. So if I type in the word break like so, it's going to run this loop one time and then it's going to break out of the loop. Okay, so you're like, well, that doesn't make sense, Mark. Then how do we decide how many times a loop needs to go? Well, that's a great question. Well, let's go back to Lesson 3 and notice how we were doing some fun things here, like if player health is less than or equal to this and that and etc. It's kind of getting interesting here because we're attacking the player and such. And then we've got these enemy dice, which I thought was really cool, where basically it generates random numbers and one player can attack the other, etc., etc., etc. So how can we redo all of this code here, but using a loop? Well, let's build that right now. We'll say var, just say player health equals 100 of type int. See, even I make mistakes all the time. 100. I try not to edit out too many of the mistakes so you can see what goes on. It's not all rainbows and butterflies and cupcakes. Player health, let's say enemy health of type int, equals 100. We'll make them fair combatants. And we're just going to say var attack damage. I'm going to do one attack damage that's the same for both, just so to make this easier, simpler. We could have made their own attack damage for each of them, but whatever. Let's not do that. So player health, enemy health, attack damage. Now, remember we used a random generator before, so I'm going to grab that using import, paste it over here. If you don't have the code file from the last lesson in front of you, that's fine. Just type in using verse.org/random. And what we're going to do is use the get random ints. In fact, I'll copy these two like so. Okay, so we've got these, paste here. Notice how when I'm out of the loop, it's not doing it correctly because those indentations are important. So player dice result, enemy dice result. What we want to do is let them keep attacking each other until one or the other dies, really. So what we'll do is we'll say if statements, right? We're going to say if player health is less than or equal to 0, what do we want to do? Well, we'll do the colon here, and then we're going to say print player died. Okay, player died. And then what do we want to do? We want to break. We want to break out of the loop. We don't want to loop anymore if one of them's died, right? So now I can actually get rid of this break here for now. So if player health is less than or equal to 0, player died, break. Else if enemy health is less than or equal to 0, we're going to say print enemy died. All right, not bad, and we'll break again. Okay, we'll break again. If, else if, break, break, break. Okay, not bad. Give some cleanup here. Okay, we're just not attacking. We're not attacking, right? So we need to attack the player. So we can do some more code here, actually, like we did before. Remember how over here we compared the dice to even see if they could attack, like if enemy dice result is greater than this. So we can actually go ahead and do that same exact thing here. I can copy this code and paste it here. And we can say if enemy dice result is greater than player dice result, so that means the enemy gets to attack first, okay? So we're going to say player health minus equals enemy attack damage. Okay, I like that. Enemy attack successful. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of the extra stuff. We'll just say enemy attack successful. Else if enemy dice result is the same as player dice result, set player health. Okay, roll as a tie, player lost 1 HP. And lastly, it says print the enemy missed. But in this case here, what I want to do is if it's the opposite of this, so if the enemy dice result is less than the player dice result, basically the opposite, then we want the player to attack. And I could probably just do that here in the else statement because we already handled the greater than for the enemy dice result. So if they attack, that's great. If it was a tie, do this. Otherwise, I think the player should attack. So in this case here, we're going to set enemy health to minus equal attack damage. And this code actually won't compile. And you're going to see a little error on the right-hand side. You could barely see that little red error, but it won't compile because I copied over code, which is a common thing to do, and it's also common to have compiler error. So I want to show you what a compiler error looks like in Unreal. If I go to verse, build verse code, you're going to see a new pop-up on your window, all right? And it's telling me what's going on. Script error. I expected a block, but got end of line following the if. Like, wait, what's going on? And I can click it, and sometimes it can be really smart and load up what it needs to load up. And sure enough, look at this. We have a problem with our code here. There's no colon at the end of the else if. So that's awesome. I can save that, fix that. But now look, enemy attack damage. Unknown identifier, enemy attack damage. But you know what's interesting? That error was there before, but it didn't give me a squiggly before. And that's because with verse and because it's still new, sometimes it struggles to give you errors if you already have errors, or rather give you the rest of the errors. So back here, remember, I had to add the colon, and it doesn't tell me about that error, not until I put this on here, the colon. And then if I was to run the code again or compile it, then it would give me an error for this line. And it doesn't know what this is because I copied a variable over that doesn't exist. So what we're doing right now is called debugging, okay? You're learning about debugging. And so we're debugging our code. And it says that it can't unknown identifier. Well, if I Control C, Control F to find, and Control V to paste, this is not anywhere else in my file. And that's because I changed the attack damage in this file to attack damage. So I'm just going to take off the word enemy, and now our compiler error is gone, and save it. So we want to attack the player, enemy dice result, player dice result. Excellent. If it's the same, the player's going to lose out on that one. Sorry, buddy. Otherwise, the enemy is going to be attacked. And so we're going to say print player attack successful. Okay? Like so. Then we're going to go through this if statement and actually do some more things. So let's recap. Loop is going to run a bunch of times, as fast as the device or the game engine will allow. Okay? And every time it's going to roll the dice. Every single time, anything that's in the loop, over and over and over again. Okay? This code's like destroyed and run every single time. So there we go. We got new dice rolls every time. And just for fun, let's print those. Say print player dice. This would be player dice result. And we're going to print the enemy dice, like so. And this would be enemy dice result. Autocomplete only works half the time. Get used to that too, for right now. Enemy dice result. We're just going to print those up, and we should see those change every time because this is going to be called every time in the loop and give us a new random number. So let's try the attack for the enemy. Let's try the attack for a tie. Let's then do the player attack if those two failed. So if the player's dice was bigger. And what I also want to do is count our loop iterations. So I'm going to make a new variable above the loop right here. So var, we're just going to call this iteration, and I'm going to call this of type int. We'll say equals 0, and then we're just going to say iteration, all right, plus equals 1, like so. Set iteration plus equals 1. Again, take the current iteration and add 1 on top of it. Okay, so that way we can just know what's happening here, and then we can print that as well. We can say print loop iteration. Let's call this iteration. Okay. If I put this variable inside of the loop, it's going to reset every time. It has to be outside of the loop. Okay, so we're going to update it every time we go through the loop, just so we can see that it's actually working. Okay. Then, after the attacks happen, let's actually check some more logic. If the player health is less than or equal to 0, the player died, break. Else if enemy health is less than or equal to 0, print enemy died, break. So these breaks are going to break the loop. So if I have more code outside of the loop, so I follow this little line all the way down, I'm going to put right here, print the game has ended, okay? If I tab this in, it's now in the loop. It's going to get printed every time. So we want to keep it on the outside. Remember, the scope is super important, where things go. If things that go in the loop would be on this line here, okay? Out here. So our print is good. So this should never be called until our game has actually ended. And so if, else if. Now, if neither of these are true, if no one's died, the break was not called, and the loop will just continue spinning. Let's give that a shot, shall we? Let's go back to our editor. Okay, let's clear our error. And I got rid of our little stuff there. Great. Verse build code, and content browser, and we should see lesson 4 in here now. Drag our little thingy there. And this time we do need to push changes because I just dragged the object in. And let's do that. Here we go. Let's give it a test. Start game. Okay, so things are definitely happening. Let's go up to the top here. Let's see how long it took for one of them to die. Okay, so player dice 11, enemy dice. Player attack was successful. Enemy attack successful. Roll was a tie. Player lost 1 HP. That's cool. So cool stuff here, right? But notice how it's not printing everything on here, and that's because our loop's going so fast and printing so much that Fortnite is kind of yelling at us. So what we can do is we can clean up some of our stuff here. So we know that it's working. We've tested our code. It's working. The loop iteration is working, which is really nice. And so what we can do is just comment out some of this code so we're not taking up the entire log. So I can highlight this, Control / to comment it, or you can just type in those hashtags automatically. All right, and so that looks good to me. And what I want to do is, we know when the player is being attacked as well too. So I'm going to comment out this one, comment out this one again, Control / comment out this one. And here I know that these are only going to print out when one or the other dies, and so that's fine. And I'm going to go ahead and save that here, and we'll see if we can run it with just this one print here, and if not, we'll take that one off as well too. Just doing some simple debugging and getting the results that we need. We're programmers now, and that's what we do. Okay, we're going to end the game, build verse code, push verse changes. There we go. So now we can see the game ended because we're not spamming the log there. Okay, so loop iteration. So it took 16 back and forth attacks. Now imagine if we had not used a loop and we didn't like repeat, right? Like that's pretty crazy, right? Like we'd have to copy and paste code up to 16 times, but loops, that's why we use tools like that. And you're gonna find those in every single game as well too. In fact, every Fortnite game I have built so far with UEFN has had a loop in it. So loop iterations 1 through 16, the enemy died, the game has ended. Notice how game has ended, didn't get called until the enemy died. All right, let me end this game. I hope you're starting to see like the power of code, especially when it comes to games, is we can do really cool things like this. And we also learned a little bit of debugging today as well too on some of these, with some of the errors when we copied and pasted, and about the log, we solved the logging problem. And I'm gonna show you one more thing with loops. I showed you a simple loop like so, all right? We can also control a loop with just a fixed amount of numbers as well too. So for instance, I could say loop, we'll make another loop. You can also do loops within loops if you want. We'll make another loop though. And in this case here, you know, we just want to, let's just run a counter real quick, just for fun. So what I want to do is make a variable above our loop, call it var. I'm gonna call this idx for index. You're gonna see this in programming a lot. You'll see things like I or x or idx, okay? I've typed int equals 0, okay? And what we can do is in our loop here, we can say, you know, if we want this to run, you know, 10 times, we say if idx, okay, if idx is less than, we'll say what, less than 10? Yeah, less than 10, whatever. Less than 10, what do we want to do? We want to say idx plus equals 1. And we got to set that, like so. I always forget the set keyword, okay? idx plus equals 1. And otherwise, oops, actually what I meant to do was break here, and then down here, set idx to 1. And notice what happened when we press tab. Unreachable code. It's unreachable because we put a break statement there, okay? So the editor is a little bit helpful. So this code here, what would happen is we would say idx starts at 0, and we're gonna loop through this every single time. If idx is less than 10, that's actually wrong, that's a logic error. We say if idx is greater than 10, or equal to 10, or whatever logic you want in there, it doesn't matter. We could start this at 1 if we wanted. I'm just showing you an example. So we then increase that index here, okay? So we run this a fixed amount of times. Now, this is not how I would run a loop. If I needed it to run a fixed amount of times, I would not do it like this. Okay, this is just one way you can manage your loop though, is you give it a condition to break out of, and then you increase the index of some variable or some other thing, okay? I'm gonna comment that out, Control /, Just good for you to know. I'll show you a better way to work with, let's say, a range of numbers, and that's using a for loop. It's technically a for expression is what they call it. So we're going to say for x, that's my variable name, colon of type int, equals 1 dot dot 10, colon, print, I'm going to say index x. Okay. Oh no, this is one of those heart attack moments. There's a new syntax, crazy. Here's what's happening. We are creating a little variable here, a constant, okay? And what's gonna happen is every single time this loop runs, it's gonna create a new constant, okay? So even though you don't see it here, this loop's gonna run over and over and over and over again for this entire index here, okay? And every time it does that, it's gonna put this value, the current index that the loop is on. Remember how we tracked the index? We did the loop iteration up here to know how far our loop was going. In this case here, we're storing that index in x. That's happening automatically. And what we're saying is, hey, we want to start at 1 and we want to go to 10, okay? And we want to print that index there, okay? We want to print that for all 10 times in this for statement here, okay? I'm going to save this. And what I want to do is, for right now, on this first loop, okay, I'm just going to break it at the top just so we can not have to run the entire loop and I don't have to comment everything out. I'm going to break it at the top so we just go straight here to this bottom one. I just want to show you this for loop or for expression. Go to Unreal, verse, build verse code, and push verse changes. I'm going to show you one error handling issue that you may run into when building with Unreal. So this session here, even though I pushed verse changes, has been running for about 5 minutes. Don't ever let it go that long. That means that it's not connected, it's not working. In this case, you'll want to kill your Fortnite game, let your editor fix itself, and then reload it again. And if your editor continues to spin forever, then you may need to close the UEFN and relaunch everything. This happens to me about 10 times per day currently, just so you know. So you could right-click your Fortnite game and close all your windows. And notice how it says launch session. It had lost its connection to the session. So then you can restart it now. Okay, here we are. Start game. Tab. Log. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so that worked. Our little loopy loop worked like so. So that's another way to run a loop, and you'll start working with these a ton when you're working with arrays, which are a list of items, and maps, which are kind of like key value dictionary data structures. Let's undo that here. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, it's not that one, there's this one. Let's get rid of that one. Okay, so great stuff here. We've learned about simple loops, and I'm going to give you an exercise now that you can do on your own here at the bottom. And by the way, you can highlight everything and shift tab or tab to move everything. It's wonky sometimes. Okay, so create 2 loops for something you would use in a video game besides what we did here. Create a third for loop for a third game feature that requires a loop. So you're gonna make 2 loops using the loop keyword for a feature of a game. I don't know what that could be. Maybe like in a Call of Duty game, you've got a list of items or a list of guns. I don't know. Make 2 loops for 2 different features of a game, and then make a third loop that's a for loop or a for expression for another feature of that game or a different game. So think of 3 games or 3 features of a game and build loops to either populate a list or create items. This is common stuff, and it's important that you learn how to solve problems with code. So go ahead and do that, and you can post the solutions in the Discord channel. And remember, there is way more verse content to come. If you didn't know, my name is Mark Wahlbeck, and you can watch the next video in this series right here. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you can know when the next videos are released.